Celeste proves that video games are just as capable of complex, meaningful storytelling as books and films, and in some ways even exceed them. Let me explain, and back up a bit. You probably know this game, if you haven't played it yourself, as that one indie from a few years ago that people still will not shut up about. So allow me to add my name to that list. Released in January 2018 by the tiny, mostly overlooked studio now known as Extremely OK Games, Celeste almost immediately became one of the most memorable and lauded games in the past few years, independent or otherwise. But at first glance, nothing about it really jumps off the page. Its mostly pixel art style is cute, but certainly not revolutionary. Its gameplay looks pretty standard for a platformer. Its story is formed around effective but well-worn tropes. So what gives? It would be both easy and true to say that the execution of each of those elements was simply outstanding. The game looks great, sounds great, feels great, but it is more than the pretty little adventure it appears to be. It's an experience that will punch you right in the gut and have you thanking it. Why, despite its notorious difficulty, did so many people play through it? Why can we never get this 8-hour indie game out of our heads? Why did I die 3,374 times on a single level and not even once consider giving up? Welcome to Reconstructed. Full spoiler warning for Celeste, aside from the DLC chapter Farewell. The game starts out with a simple premise. There's a mountain, capitalized, and you're going to climb it. The prologue introduces us to Madeline, our player character who doesn't seem particularly confident in what she's setting out to do, but determined nonetheless. After a strange interaction with an antagonistic old woman, the short little level teaches you the primary movement mechanics of jumping, climbing, and dashing. Jumps are self-explanatory, climbing lets you scale walls but your stamina runs out quickly, and dashes are a quick burst of movement in one of 8 directions. It's important to note that the dash can only be used once in the air before the player touches the ground, signified by Madeline's hair changing from red to blue. After this tutorial, the prologue pans up to a purple night sky and the words, "You can do this," and you're on your way. The first chapter of the game has Madeline climb through the deteriorating skyscrapers of an abandoned city at the base of the mountain. The setting is a bit eerie, a hollowed out place being reclaimed by nature, old-fashioned advertisements for products that can no longer be bought still pasted on the crumbling walls. There are secrets to be found under and through every rock, especially the collectible strawberries, which offer no benefit beside 1,000 points toward a non-existent score. On the way up, Madeline meets fellow traveler Theo, a bearded, flannel-wearing hipster dude from Seattle. He's friendly and charming, but seems to only be there for social media pictures. At the end of the level stands a tall, chilling memorial to those who perished on the climb, and Madeline's determination begins to waver. She wakes up in the next chapter to an altered environment. Text is scrambled, colors are inverted, rocks are floating in the air. She then descends to the basement of what appears to be an old castle, finding a large mirror. Madeline follows her reflection up through the ruins. When she catches up, the shadow reveals herself to be part of Madeline, an aloof and creepy doppelganger. Part of Madeline, who from now on will be referred to as Madeline, berates the original, asserting she has no chance of reaching the summit and that they should just give up and go home. This cutscene initiates a chase sequence where Madeline has to flee from an increasing number of dark, red-eyed copies of herself. Eventually she escapes and finds another ancient relic from another time, a payphone. In a panic she calls an unnamed character before being made to realize that she's dreaming. She wakes up, walks through the old castle, and uses the same payphone to call her mom, looking for reassurance. Even though it was a dream, this chapter sets up Madeline's main conflict. She is running from herself, her anxieties, her doubts, and the dream manifested that into something literal. But if it was just a dream, how would she have known about that payphone? Anyway, disheveled but not ready to turn back, Madeline presses on into Chapter 3, where she stumbles on an old hotel. The building is in clear disarray, staffed only by Mr. Oshiro, who is clearly just a ghost, but doesn't seem to know it himself. Madeline has no interest in staying, but Oshiro insists more and more strongly that she does, making it clear he's not in touch with reality. Theo is also in the resort, but recognizes the massive red flags and urges Madeline to escape out the back with him. She refuses, however, somehow convinced that she can help Oshiro. All by herself, Madeline cleans up the overwhelming mess filling the hotel's every room, but is only met with a cold shoulder by the ghost, who pressures her even harder into staying a night, now offering the presidential suite, which features a large mirror. Madeline breaks out, firmly in the real world now, and simply says what Oshiro needed to hear. This finally gives Madeline a chance to get out, but as she's leaving, Oshiro has a moment of self-awareness and asks sincerely what he did wrong. Before she can answer, Madeline butts in and ruthlessly insults him and his livelihood until he fills with rage and turns into a monster, chasing them away for good. Frustrated by this encounter and her inability to help, Madeline resolves to go it alone from here on out as she enters Chapter 4. The platforming through this beautiful sunset level gets harder and harder as it goes on. The wind gets stronger and stronger and snowballs begin to fly through unpredictably. In some screens it becomes nearly impossible for Madeline to even walk forward, having to rely primarily on her dash. At the end of it all, she finds Theo again, and together they ride across a chasm in an old rickety gondola that looks kind of familiar. Just as Madeline starts getting worried, the gondola stalls out, triggering a full-on panic attack. Acting quickly, Theo teaches her a breathing technique where you imagine keeping a feather afloat. It works. Madeline calms down, the gondola starts moving again, and they make it safely to the other side. At the start of Chapter 5, Madeline and Theo discover some sort of temple, older and stranger yet than the structures they've found before. Despite Madeline's reservations, Theo rushes in alone, hoping for some cool pictures. This is the Mirror Temple, an area far darker and more confusing than any previous chapter. It's easy for the player to get lost in its twisting corridors and branching paths. Eventually, Madeline finds her biggest mirror yet, which sucks her into a distorted, alternate world full of hostile, aggressive monsters. Once again, Madeline appears, only to say that this is not her doing, but rather a manifestation of Madeline's psyche, and that she deserves everything that's happening to her. Distraught, Madeline is almost ready to give up, but perseveres only because she remembers Theo might need her help. And he does, trapped in a crystal, unable to move away from the dozens of eyeballs staring into him. The only way out is for Madeline to carry him on her back. Together they push through to the source of the distortion, defeating it, freeing Theo, and escaping the nightmare world they had fallen into. Beginning Chapter 6, Madeline and Theo, grown closer due to their shared ordeal, have a long, honest conversation about their histories and what happened in their lives to bring them to the mountain. Encouraged by the connection they've made, Madeline's resolve to finish the climb is now stronger than ever, and she seems in a good mood for the first time in the entire game. She goes to sleep motivated. Tomorrow is the summit day. All her effort, her struggles, her frustrations will have been worth it when she reaches the top and fulfills the promise she made to herself. Tomorrow. She awakens to the brilliant northern lights and a golden feather floating in the corner. This feather unlocks a movement ability for Madeline, and she flies up and up into the sky, bringing her to a head-on confrontation with Madeline. Clear-headed for the first time, Madeline tells her shadow that she no longer has any need for her, and before we get into what happens next, let's examine what Celeste has already communicated at this point in its story. The game is pretty transparently built around a central metaphor of overcoming personal struggles as climbing the mountain. Our main character, for example, is trying to conquer her issues with anxiety and depression. For Madeline, climbing the mountain represents her journey to improve her mental health. And while mental health is clearly at the forefront of Celeste's narrative, the mountain works as a symbol for any sort of difficulty one may be dealing with. Theo explicitly doesn't struggle with mental health, but rather his lack of direction or purpose in life. He too is climbing the mountain. As the player progresses, the game depicts several different aspects of that battle for difficult personal growth, and ends up making some valuable statements about how to achieve it, communicated both through its story and its gameplay. To start off, let's take a closer look at the third chapter and the tragedy of Mr. Oshiro. From the moment Madeline sets foot in the Celestial Resort, one thing is made very clear. Oshiro is in denial. He is dead, and his precious hotel is closed and falling apart, windows broken, and curtains torn, but he acts as if none of that were true. He also seems to completely ignore Madeline's insistence that she needs to keep climbing and can't spend the night. The platforming as Madeline follows the ghostly concierge through the resort is constructed out of a combination of endless clutter and this weird red and black sludge which moves in predictable patterns and kills the player on contact. Eventually, she reaches a massive room more clogged with mess than anything before it. It's here that Madeline makes the critical decision to try to help Oshiro rather than sneak out on her own, which she does have the opportunity to do. The player then has to spend a significant amount of time clearing out, one by one, the books, then the towels, then the boxes. The sludge remains. By making the cleaning an active process the player has to engage with rather than just putting it in a cutscene, you really feel how much effort Madeline is investing in this creepy ghost she just met. And after the room is spotless, Oshiro is anything but truly thankful, still scheming and stressing about how to convince her to stay. Despite Madeline's work, he still fails to, or refuses to, recognize what the real problem is. Just like Madeline and Theo, Oshiro is climbing his own mountain. But he is at a standstill, stuck in a particular place on the journey. This is true literally, as he refuses to leave a specific location, and figuratively, as he denies that there is even a change he needs to make. If the player chooses to explore the back rooms, they can find old notes scattered throughout the level informing Oshiro's backstory. He was passionate about and dedicated to hospitality, but for unknown reasons the hotel was forced to close its doors for good. Instead of dealing with the grief of having to leave what he loved behind, he just didn't leave. Ever. Madeline's reaction to the situation is complex and interesting as well. She recognizes he needs help, but doesn't grasp in exactly what way. She tells him to just breathe, repeating the advice her mother gave her at the end of the second chapter. She tells him it's okay to be anxious about the mess, but in reality Oshiro was feigning being overwhelmed to manipulate her into helping. That is to say, she has been projecting her own issues onto him when they're actually quite different. And her true motivation for helping ties into that. It's not altruism so much as a sense of obligation. She seems to think that by fixing others, she can fix herself. But of course it doesn't work. On the way to the presidential suite, Oshiro has a bit of a breakdown and spews some of that sludge out of his head. The reveal that the trickiest platforming obstacle throughout the level comes directly from him, and that it's getting even worse, shows how futile Madeline's efforts have been. She can clear out the books and the boxes, but to finish the job and clear out the sludge as well, Oshiro has to meet her halfway, and he's not willing. The conflict comes to a head when Madeline appears and, correctly, calls the place a dump. This does result in a moment of reflection and honesty from Oshiro, which is quickly ruined by Madeline taking things too far, and he turns to fury instead, triggering an extended chase sequence where the player can do nothing but run away and avoid his attacks. This whole ordeal at the Celestial Resort demonstrates a couple key points about personal growth. The first is that people have to be honest with themselves about their problems or risk being stuck in a dark place for a long time. The second is that trying to help those who aren't willing to be helped is not a path toward overcoming your own issues. Madeline was not in fact equipped to help Oshiro, as Theo kindly pointed out. And her attempt to do so only ended up with everyone involved getting needlessly hurt, hardly resulting in actual progress. All that time committed and she was stuck in one building, not taking a single step on her own climb. Over the following 2 chapters, Celeste builds on these ideas, showing how powerful genuine human connection can be when you're ready to accept it. Chapter 4, Golden Ridge, begins with a conversation with the old lady from the prologue, who is just a little bit off, but offers some genuinely helpful advice. Madeline seems to have taken away from her experience at the resort the idea that it's better to do things all by herself, asking Granny about her solitary lifestyle before forging onward. The gameplay of this chapter is dominated by wind, which is just so fun. Hot take, wind levels are worse than water levels in platformers. They're not as common, but let me move forward, please. That's the one thing. But I have to give Golden Ridge a pass because the wind isn't really supposed to be fun. Or at least it serves another purpose as well. Essentially, every step Madeline takes up the mountain during this level is harder than the last. The wind continues to intensify. In the loneliest level in the gameplay communicates how grueling it can be to face things all on your own. The building anxiety of Chapter 4 crystallizes into a full panic attack at the end of the level, but thankfully Theo is now there with her and tells her to imagine keeping a feather afloat with her breathing. Giving the player control of that section in the middle of a cutscene is a brilliant decision, as it also relaxes the tension built by the gameplay. Minutes ago, the player was fighting desperately against wind, and now they have control over it. This scene contrasts with Chapter 3 in a couple important ways. First, Theo is actually prepared to help Madeline through her panic attack and has a good solution. Second, Madeline actually accepts his help. But the feather trick doesn't just help her once. Deep into the nightmare section of the Mirror Temple, Madeline is at her lowest point and ready to give up entirely. The only thing that stops her is a little voice reminding her of the feather and that Theo might need her help this time. If it weren't for her willingness to accept the support of a friend, the temple might have been where her climb ended. This concept is strengthened by the final section of the chapter, when Madeline and Theo have to work together to escape. The distorted mirror world of the temple is brought to life by the most negative emotions of those trapped in it. The game emphasizes this by giving the player control of a weird, tentacled monster for a short, unsettling, dreamlike sequence where the only way to progress is destroying Madeline herself. Controlling the monster shows they are not some external force, but rather inextricably linked to Madeline. When she finally finds Theo, trapped in the crystal, Madeline believes that all of this is her doing, her fault. Theo, however, points out that it's actually a combination of both of their dark sides, not just Madeline's. While her mind is creating the monsters, his created the crystal and the eyes embedded in the walls. This distinction in what the temple manifests for them represents how different their personal struggles are. While Madeline's problems are mostly related to her internal struggles, her mental health, Theo is confident and self-assured. However, he wrestles with external pressures instead. Theo is preoccupied by his Instapix account while Madeline doesn't even own a smartphone. He constantly relates everything he talks about to his family, especially his grandfather and sister, while she hardly brings up hers at all. He never seems to stop thinking about other people and if he is living up to their expectations for him. Theo always feels 1,000 eyes on his back, which makes it all the worse when he can't seem to find a place he really thrives. But despite all their differences, they both benefit equally from helping one another and working together. Now that Theo is the one in the vulnerable position, it's his turn to accept help, which he does without hesitation. Madeline carries him, crystal and all, through to the end of the level, but this is not a burden, it's actually a lifeline. Many of the final rooms involve puzzles that require using Theo to solve. If Madeline was there without him, she could not have kept going either. Furthermore, Theo is always giving these funny, encouraging little comments, which, given how easily Madeline can fall apart, were probably pretty important. All in all, by being willing to help each other and form a real connection, both climbers could overcome their own demons much easier than if they were alone. This growing connection between Madeline and Theo is expressed best at the start of Chapter 6, when they have a long campfire conversation and open up to each other more than ever before. This is the only time in the game where the player has control of the dialogue choices, which shows how strengthening their friendship gave it more potential meaning. Both our main characters come out of this scene feeling better than ever, and both were able to see their own problems through a new lens. But there is a lot more Celeste to play. Very quickly, the game makes it clear that forming friendships is not the end of the story. Not even close. Madeline awakens. The aurora is stunning. The campfire has turned turquoise. A new power-up, one could call it, floats in the corner. This feather allows Madeline to travel in any direction she wants for several seconds, unshackled from gravity and 8-directional movement. Using a symbol of Madeline and Theo's friendship to create a new movement ability illustrates how Madeline has a greater set of tools now as a result of their connection. She uses the feather to go where had been impossible before, straight up and also towards her shadow. Confronting Madeline by choice for the first time, she asserts that they need to go their separate ways somehow. Madeline does not need part of Madeline. And it doesn't go well. But Madeline doesn't panic. She remembers the feather and starts the breathing exercise. Up and down, slow and steady. It works, and then it doesn't. The feather suddenly gets too heavy to lift and the trick fails. It wasn't enough. Madeline falls. Down past the temple, the ridge, the resort, the castle, the city, the forest, all her hard-won progress is erased. The player has pushed past hundreds to thousands of deaths at this point, and now we are at a lower position in the climb than level number 1. Down. Now, I think, is the time to ask the question, what specific part of Madeline is Madeline? What does she represent? The answer, to be brief, is nothing. She is not one specific part, and that is maybe the entire point. At first, it's easy to jump to the conclusion that Madeline is simply all of Madeline's negative energy, the part of her that hurts her and prevents her from succeeding. This gets complicated though in the Celestial Resort when Madeline confronts Oshiro. Madeline had extensive trouble finding the words to convince the ghost that she was not going to stay, but didn't seem to be making progress at all until a reflection showed up and broke his heart just a bit. Without this, it's possible that Madeline would have acquiesced and slept a night, and maybe another. Progress on her climb stalled indefinitely. So Madeline's rude interference was actually necessary to continue the story. But of course she turns right around and takes it too far, triggering a boss sequence that probably could have been a simple stroll on the roof. In this scene, Madeline both needs Madeline to say something and also to not say something else. She is not a friend, but isn't always an enemy either. The next instinct would be to pin down Madeline as a specific emotion, or maybe one mental health problem. But both our player character and the antagonist express a wide range of emotions. They are both angry, they are both scared, they are both sarcastic, I guess. The important point is that neither seems to possess more complexity or depth than the other. And since Madeline is so complex, she cannot simply be a personification of anxiety or anything along those lines. The nightmare section of the Mirror Temple would fit that label better, a wordless, hostile place that doesn't speak or reason, just causes suffering, and it's made clear Madeline is not responsible for it. Going into writing this video, I expected to define Madeline as representative of some specific concept. However, the more I tried, the less possible it seemed to describe her character in a single statement. She's messy, the logistics of her existence inconsistent, like with how Oshiro seems to perceive her words as coming from Madeline's mouth, but Theo can clearly see them as two separate entities. While maybe there is a definitive answer out there, it began to feel like figuring out whether Hobbs is really alive or just a figment of Calvin's imagination. Forest for the trees and all that. In the end, the name Madeline is a misnomer. She is not an evil clone and cannot be reduced. Attempting to do so was the Madeline we control throughout the game's crucial error. They are both equally important parts of one whole person, but they are in a deep conflict. She wants to climb the mountain, and she doesn't. How does Celeste have the player solve that? Thanks to a conversation with Granny, Madeline realizes for the first time that her shadow might herself be scared. She had never thought about it like that before. She then tracks Madeline down, this time not to abandon her but rather have a conversation. Deeper and deeper down these flooded crystal caves, Madeline flees from this, in a flip of the gameplay of Chapter 2 when she was doing the chasing. This sequence forms more or less the final boss of the game, with Madeline dodging falling boulders and massive lasers helped along the way by plenty of golden feathers to keep pursuing her reflection. Madeline eventually runs out of energy and gives up, thinking that Madeline will get rid of her forever. Instead, it's corny, but I swear if you have to play through the whole thing, it just works. She gives her a hug. Madeline's hair then turns a new color. Not red, not purple either, but pink, representative of the two halves working in harmony for the first time. This all teaches the player that the most important thing one needs to do to overcome a difficult challenge is to love and accept yourself. If you continue to view parts of your psyche as flaws to be purged, then you'll never get to the top. This message is then proven by the gameplay. You're at the bottom of a deep pit, the only way out unreachable with just a jump and a dash. So it's a good thing you have 2 dashes now. Embracing Madeline and understanding that the part of yourself that prevents you from succeeding is not evil or to be eliminated, but rather comes from a place of fear and insecurity, just as complicated and worth listening to as any other, is the solution. And it fundamentally changes Madeline's moveset, allowing her to climb more quickly and creatively than ever before. The 7th and final chapter of the main story, Summit, is a rerun of old hits. Madeline plus Madeline, 2 dashes in hand, sprint through a series of shortened, rearranged versions of all the previous levels in the game. The speed at which you can clear each of these sections is evidence of how much stronger Madeline has now become. This level structure also shows that all the lessons Madeline learned in the early chapters were far from worthless, even if at one point she fell all the way back down. All the features and obstacles that were unique to each stage return for the first time, forcing the player to apply everything that they previously learned in terms of platforming. It fits together to demonstrate that growth doesn't need to be linear, that even if you hit rock bottom, all the hard work you did before can help you dig out a little easier. Once you put self-acceptance first, any challenge is possible. But what if I told you that Celeste still isn't over and that it's still not even close? Kinda. Celeste is a difficult game. After all, it's a story about climbing a mountain, overcoming your darkest demons. If the game were a breeze, it wouldn't pack much of a punch, would it? But as anyone who finished the main story will realize, with a mixture of despair and excitement, Summit is, after everything you've done, still pretty low on Celeste's difficulty curve. First of all, each level has a variety of optional little challenges that encourage exploration, such as the strawberries, which are both hard to discover and often to collect once you've found them. There is also a cassette tape to be found in each chapter, which unlocks the B-side, an even harder version of the level minus the story elements. Beyond that, there is also a crystal heart in each stage, much more hidden than any strawberry, the player having to solve some surprisingly complex and elegant puzzles to reveal them. Collect enough hearts, and you can play Chapter 8, The Core, where Madeline returns to the mountain a year later to reflect on her journey. If you finish that, along with beating every B-side and collecting every crystal heart, you can play the Core's B-side. Beating that unlocks, and I'm not even shitting you, the C-sides, comprising just a few screens but each one a mile ahead in difficulty than everything that's come before. Unless you're an actual genius, each C-side will take you hundreds of attempts to clear. And, for the record, I did finish all of them, and I'm not even a completionist normally. Something about the game just primed me to keep going, keep pushing my limits. It wasn't just the story or just the gameplay, but the combination of both which makes it so compelling to play on past the credits. After all, Celeste is itself a Hold up, you can make your pretentious point later because Celeste still isn't over. Every A-side, B-side, and C-side have a single golden strawberry, which you can only get by finishing the level without dying a single time. There's even one in Chapter 1A you can get by completing it without using your dash, which I didn't do that one, I couldn't do that one. Don't judge me unless you've done it yourself. And then there's the speedruns. There exists a flourishing community of people trying to finish the game as fast as possible. Over 2,500 people have submitted runs, making it the 6th most popular speed game of all time, behind only Minecraft, 2 Mario games, Portal, and Roblox Speedrun 4, which as everyone knows was awarded Game of the Year in 2017. These speedrunners have brought the game to new heights, raising their skill levels far beyond what was ever conceived of originally. The way they have mastered Celeste's movement is mesmerizing, and I highly recommend you watch a few runs if you haven't already. At one point, there was even a weekly speedrunning league with a $5,000 cash prize donated by the developers themselves, and I helped commentate for it. Welcome everyone to this installment of GSA's Celeste Tournament. This is the second round featuring Flare Bear versus Nero. Just some fun Skyehoppers lore for you there. I believe that the reason speedrunning this game in particular is so wildly popular is how well the challenge associated with it meshes with the design of Celeste, including its story. As I've discussed, it's a game about personal growth, the challenges that come with accomplishing it, and the value of overcoming them in the name of self-improvement. The true brilliance of Celeste is how it's designed to be one of the challenges that its story depicts. It is about the mountain and is the mountain simultaneously. A lot of willpower is required of the player to push through its toughest sequences, so reaching the summit is a trying task even for experienced gamers. The act of completing the game parallels the journey Madeline goes through in its narrative, though probably less life-changing. This creates a feeling of immense satisfaction on completion and forces you to consider what else you can achieve if you set your mind to it. The extra challenge levels and speedruns spring from this idea. Celeste does not demand the player climb additional mountains, but does go above and beyond to provide the space for them to do so if they're ready and willing. This culminates in Chapter 9, Farewell, a downloadable final level released well after the game's initial launch. It is absolutely gorgeous and brutally difficult. Everything the game has been so far is here in excellent form, including a touching story which I won't spoil. The gameplay is, I think, clearly inspired by the speedrunners that predate it, even canonizing the term wave dashing to describe an advanced movement technique. Celeste never runs out of mountains, and it took me 3,374 deaths, but I climbed this one too. I couldn't not do it. Celeste is never really over. This video is not about whether difficulty in video games is good or bad, a topic that has been thoroughly debated already, and this game does not hold a rigid view of what difficulty should be. It never backs down from providing a challenge, but also softens the blow in a lot of subtle ways that encourage the player to keep going. This includes programming a few frames of leeway in jumping off ledges, or a few pixels when dashing off a wall, things that won't be consciously noticed, but will be felt. The way deaths work in this game is another key factor in what keeps players from quitting. They're designed to be frequent, but not punishing. The animation for dying and respawning is very quick, and you're never really set back by more than a few moves. This eliminates a lot of the frustration that comes along with repeated deaths in other games, and no one failure really gets you down. After finishing each stage, the game counts up your total deaths in a way that's far more satisfying than shameful, and I often found myself hoping for the number to be higher as a sort of proof of my effort. And for the people that still find the game inaccessible, there exists a robust assist mode which allows virtually anyone to experience it regardless of skill or ability to perform specific actions. Celeste wants you to finish it, wants you to succeed. As a result, it may be the hardest game that anyone can beat, so if someone strongly recommends it to you, you should at least give it a shot, Dad. Finally, it's important to note that the game doesn't believe that accomplishing arbitrary goals is the be-all end-all of personal growth. Before starting the summit chapter, Madeline reassures Madeline that she will be okay with it if they can't reach the top. What truly matters is not some preconceived finish line, it's how much you can learn about yourself when you try as hard as you can. The central metaphor of Celeste is a very powerful one, and playing through it has genuinely helped a lot of people work through issues they may not have even realized they had. It certainly taught me to have more belief in myself and my abilities, and to keep persevering even when the going gets tough. For a more thorough analysis of the game with a focus on how to apply it to one's own personal struggles, check out this wonderful video by the very underappreciated channel Transparency, as well as this Medium article by the game's director, Maddie Thorson, a non-binary trans person who was still grappling with their identity while developing the game, and now sees it as a work inextricably linked to trans issues and reveals that Madeline is canonically trans as well. Both are linked below. A prevalent maxim in writing is show, don't tell. The idea, of course, is that ideas should be communicated to the reader in ways other than explicit statements. This holds true in other storytelling media as well, such as films and graphic novels, and video games. In fact, games have the potential to take this idea one step further by weaving gameplay in between the dialogue and cutscenes. This potential is often unrealized, but Celeste demonstrates better than maybe any other the latent power of the medium. It shows a story about achieving personal growth through difficult challenges, and by its gameplay is a difficult challenge through which one can grow. Celeste doesn't just tell you you can do this, and doesn't just show someone doing it. It makes you prove it. Hey, thanks for watching. This one meant a lot to me. Please do like and subscribe if you feel like it, and also consider sharing the video on other platforms. The right retweet or Reddit post at the right time can make a world of difference for a tiny channel like mine, so it would be a huge help. Finally, I have a Patreon where you can get early access to videos, weekly update posts, my Discord server, and in the future we'll be able to vote on video topics. It's not much now, but I'm aiming to build a community around discussing and analyzing media on a regular basis, so if you want to get in super early on that, consider supporting me there. As always, I've been Skyehoppers, and I'll see you in the next one.